A blind woman stumbles into the lair of New York's most dangerous mafia boss. And instead of being killed, he looks at the scar on her neck and whispers two words, mine. But this isn't a story about a powerful man saving a vulnerable woman. This is the story of a man who feigned blindness for 10 years, waiting for the right moment to take them all down. Watch until the end to find out who the real most dangerous person in this story is. Like and comment with the name of the city you're watching. I want to know how far my story has progressed. The rain came down the way bad news always does, sideways, without warning, and all at once. Lydia Hayes felt it before she heard it. A pressure shift in the air, the way the city's noise bounced differently off wet pavement. She was 3 blocks from the subway entrance when the sky opened up, and within seconds her coat was soaked through to the shoulder. She stood on the corner of 55th and 5th, white cane extended, rain drumming against her face, and she did what she always did when the city turned hostile. She listened. Traffic to her left, maybe 40 feet. A bus idling somewhere behind her. Footsteps scattering in every direction as people ran for cover. And ahead of her, directly ahead, the sound of a revolving door, the muted hush of climate-controlled air, the faint smell of hothouse flowers cutting through the diesel and rain. A hotel. Big one, by the acoustics. She hadn't planned on going inside. She never went into places she hadn't already mapped in her head, hadn't walked 3 times with her cane tip counting the distance between obstacles. Unknown interiors made her stomach tight. Too many variables. Too many people moving unpredictably. But the rain was getting worse, and her phone had died 40 minutes ago, and Lydia Hayes was many things. Disciplined, careful, precise. But she was not stupid. She crossed the sidewalk and pushed through the revolving door. The warmth hit her first. Then the smell. Lilies and leather, and something older underneath, like money that had been sitting in the same rooms for a century. Marble floors. She could tell from the way sound traveled, clean and reverberant. High ceilings. A lot of space between her and the nearest wall. She kept her cane moving in short arcs, building the room in her mind. A wide lobby, front desk to her right, seating area somewhere ahead, corridor branching left. She took 3 steps in and stopped to shake the rain from her hair. Behind her, the revolving door exhaled cold air as someone else entered. She moved to her left, out of the flow of foot traffic, and oriented herself against what felt like a pillar, broad and solid at her back. She would wait out the rain. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Then she would find a house phone, call her building's front desk, and have someone come get her. Simple. Except nothing about the next 6 minutes was going to be simple. She heard them before she understood what she was hearing. A cluster of men moving from her left, from that corridor she'd identified, and the quality of their movement was wrong. Not the loose, distracted shuffling of hotel guests. These men walked with intention, with spacing, controlled. The kind of footfalls that come from people who have spent years moving through rooms where the wrong step could get someone killed. She counted 4 sets, maybe 5. And then another sound, a murmur of conversation, low enough that she couldn't pull individual words, and beneath it, the ambient quiet of a room that had been cleared. Somewhere not far away, a door had been closed on the rest of the world. Lydia went still. Her hand tightened on her cane. She told herself it was nothing. Hotels had security. Hotels had private events. The St. Regis, and she'd recognized the address now, placed it from years of navigating this neighborhood by sound and memory, hosted corporate summits, political fundraisers, all manner of things that required men with earpieces and controlled footfalls. She told herself that. And then she made her mistake. She shifted her weight, turning to find the seating area, and her cane caught the edge of something she hadn't mapped. A low decorative table, some architect's idea of elegance. And the vase on top of it went over, crystal on marble. The sound detonated through the lobby like a gunshot. Every conversation in the room stopped. The footsteps from the corridor froze. And then, very quietly, someone said, "Get her." She didn't run. Running in an unmapped space was how you broke an ankle, cracked your skull on a corner, gave people exactly the panic they were looking for. She stood straight, cane held loosely at her side, and waited. They came from 2 directions. She tracked them by sound, one from her left, one cutting across the lobby from the front desk area. Professionals, the way they moved, She had maybe 2 seconds before hands were on her. A third set of footsteps, heavier than the others, cut through from somewhere directly ahead. Whoever it was moved fast and with absolute authority, and both of the approaching sets slowed in response, waiting, deferring. The heavy footsteps stopped 3 feet in front of her. She could hear his breathing, slow, controlled, the way people breathe when they've trained themselves not to give anything away. He was tall. The direction of the sound placed him well above her eye level, and he smelled like rain, too, she realized. He'd come in recently, or he'd been standing near an open window. "Who are you?" he said. His voice was the kind that didn't need to rise to carry weight. It landed in her chest like a closed fist. "Lydia Hayes," she said. "I came in out of the rain. I didn't realize—" "What didn't you realize?" Not a question, a test. "That the lobby was occupied," she said. "I'll leave." "You knocked over a $12,000 vase." "I'll leave and I won't knock anything else over." She kept her voice even. "I'm blind. I didn't see the table." A pause. She heard the 2 men who'd been approaching hold their positions. Someone to her far right shifted weight. A third person she hadn't fully tracked. The room felt like a held breath. "Samuels," the man in front of her said. "Boss." From her right. "Is she wearing a wire?" A beat of silence, then the sound of movement. The man called Samuels coming toward her from the right. She didn't move when hands touched her shoulders, ran down her arms, checked her coat pockets. Clinical, efficient, the scan of someone who'd done this before. "Clean," Samuels said. The man in front of her hadn't moved. "Your cane," he said. "Excuse me?" "Hand me your cane." She felt the pull of instinct. The cane was her primary tool, her navigation system, and more than that, but she let none of that show on her face. She held it out, heard him take it. The sound of his hands moving over it, grip, shaft, tip. He was checking the interior weight, she realized, checking for modifications. He handed it back without comment. "Who sent you?" he said. "Nobody sent me," she said. "It's raining." "It was raining 3 hours ago. Why are you out in it now?" "I had a recording session. It ran long. My phone died." She kept her hands loose at her sides. "I'm a cellist. I was on my way to the 53rd Street station, and the storm got bad. I heard a revolving door. I came inside. I didn't know this was—" She paused deliberately. "Anything in particular?" Another silence, longer this time. She heard him step closer, 1 pace. Close enough now that she could feel the displaced air, could map the shape of his presence more clearly. He was examining her, she knew. Looking at her face the way people did when they forgot that not being able to see didn't mean she couldn't feel herself being studied. And then his breathing changed, just slightly, an intake that didn't quite resolve. She felt his hand, not grabbing, not aggressive, but deliberate, move to the collar of her coat. His fingers turned it aside, and the air touched her neck, the left side of her neck, where the scar was. 3 inches long, slightly raised, running diagonally from below her ear toward her collarbone. She'd had it since she was 7 years old. The lobby was absolutely silent. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Something had gone out of it, the controlled blankness. And something else had come in that she couldn't immediately name. "Where did you get this?" he said. "I was in an accident," she said, "when I was a child." His hand withdrew. She heard him take 1 step back, and then he said, very quietly, something that made no sense to her at all. "Mine." Just that. 1 word, barely audible, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from a long distance away, even though he was standing right in front of her. "I'm sorry?" she said. He didn't repeat it. Instead, "Samuels, clear the lobby. Get Mercer on the door." A pause. "And cancel the rest of tonight." "Boss, cancel it." The lobby erupted in controlled motion, footsteps moving in every direction, the sound of radio murmurs, doors opening and closing. Whoever these men were, they moved when he told them to move. The man himself hadn't stepped away from her. "You're going to come with me," he said. "No," she said. A beat. "That wasn't a question," he said. "I know it wasn't. I'm still saying no." She lifted her chin slightly. "I don't know who you are. I don't know what this is. I came in from the rain and my intent was to wait 20 minutes and leave. I'd like to do that. Your intent, he repeated. Something moved in his voice. Not quite amusement, not quite anything she could place. I'm not going anywhere with anyone I haven't been introduced to, she said. Another pause. Longer. And then, Cassian Moretti. She kept her face neutral. She kept her breathing steady. She had spent years keeping her face neutral when the name Moretti came up in conversation, in news reports she had read to her by computer voice, in the whispered stories her father used to cut off the moment he noticed she was in the room. Lydia Hayes, she said again, which I told you. I know who you are, he said. That was when the floor shifted under her feet. Not literally, but the way the world tilts when something you've prepared for finally arrives and is still worse than you expected. Then you know I'm nobody, she said. A musician. I teach lessons on the weekends. I have a studio apartment in Inwood and a cat named Your father's name was Raymond Hayes, Cassian said. He worked for my family for 11 years. He was our best numbers man. He knew where every dollar was, every account, every offshore structure we'd built over 2 decades. A pause. And then one night 10 years ago, he disappeared, along with a ledger that belongs to me. Lydia said nothing. The rain hammered against the hotel windows. You look like him, Cassian said. Around the eyes. I couldn't see it in the photographs. But in person. He stopped. Come with me. I'm not asking a second time. She could say no again. She could make noise, cause a scene, and hope it mattered. Except there was no one left in this lobby who wasn't already his, and she knew it. She could feel the shape of the room around her, the men positioned at intervals. The doors she couldn't see but knew were covered. She thought about everything her father had taught her. Patience, angles. The difference between a situation that was lost and a situation that only looked lost. All right, she said. He moved to her side, not taking her arm, she noted, not grabbing her, but placing himself close enough that she could track him. That surprised her. It meant he'd been around blind people before, or he'd done his research. She filed that away. They crossed the lobby. She counted steps, memorized turns, cataloged every sound. An elevator. She heard the doors, felt the slightly pressurized air. They went up. 14th, 15th floor at least, judging by the duration of the climb. When the doors opened, the temperature was different and the acoustics changed entirely. Carpet instead of marble, lower ceilings, the intimate hush of a private floor. He led her down a corridor and through a door, and then she was in a room that smelled like leather and old wood, and faintly, cigarette smoke that had been absent for years but never fully left the walls. He didn't speak for a moment. She heard him move to what she gauged as a bar cart, glass on glass, and then he was still. Sit down, he said. I'm fine standing. It's going to be a long conversation. Then I'll stand through a long conversation. A sound escaped him that might have been something close to a laugh, pressed down before it could fully form. She heard him settle into a chair. She remained where she was, at the room's edge, cane in hand, building her mental map of the space. Desk ahead and slightly left, seating cluster in front of her, window to her far right. She could hear rain against glass. 2 other entry points besides the door she'd come through. A fireplace, unlit, somewhere on the left wall. Your father didn't just take the ledger, Cassian said. He encrypted it, hid it inside something nobody would think to look inside. He stopped. We've been looking for 10 years. Then I can't help you, she said. My father died 10 years ago. I was 16. Whatever he did with whatever he took from you, he took that to wherever he went. He died saving your life, Cassian said. There was a hit. The Romano family, our primary competition, sent 2 men to the house. Raymond put himself between them and you. You took a blade across the neck that was meant to kill you cleanly. He didn't survive the night. Her throat had closed. She managed to keep it off her face. I know how my father died, she said. You know the version they told a 16-year-old blind girl, Cassian said. You don't know why it happened. A pause. The Romanos didn't hit that house to rob it. They hit it because someone inside the Moretti organization told them Raymond was planning to run, that he'd already prepared an exit, that the ledger was going with him. The rain. The rain was the only sound for a long moment. Someone inside your organization, she said carefully. Yes. And you never found out who? I had my suspicions. I acted on some of them. The problem is that whoever it was, whoever sold Raymond out, they're still operational, still connected. And the ledger, whatever Raymond did with it, is the only thing that has enough information to expose them completely. Names, accounts, transfers, proof that would end careers and end lives. He paused. Which is why the Romanos still want it, and why certain people inside my own organization want it first. Lydia stood very still. Why are you telling me this? She said. Because you need to understand what you walked into, he said. The people who want that ledger. They'll find out you were here tonight. They'll find out who you are, if they don't already know, and they will come for you. I still don't know where it is, she said. I know, he said. And the quality of his voice had gone strange again. That same distance, that same fractured quality she'd heard downstairs when he said that single word over her scar. But they won't believe you. A door opened somewhere behind her. She heard new footsteps, someone entering from the secondary access point she'd already mapped. Boss, male voice, younger than Samuel's, tight with something. Vega's been on the phone. Romano soldiers hit the warehouse on 10th. Dolan's crew is down. It's moving fast. She heard Cassian stand. How many? He said. 7 dead, maybe more. They're not stopping. A pause that lasted no more than 2 seconds. She could hear him thinking, or not thinking exactly, but deciding, the way men decide when they've made the calculation before they even know they're making it. Lock this floor down, he said. Nobody gets to this room. And her? The young man said. Like she wasn't in the room, like she was a piece of furniture to be managed. A pause. She stays, Cassian said. Boss, she stays. The footsteps retreated. The door closed. She heard Cassian cross the room, toward the window, she thought, or toward the desk. And then he stopped, and she couldn't fully track him anymore, which meant he was standing in a dead spot in her mental map, close to the left wall. There's a war starting tonight, he said. You're not safe outside this building. I'm not sure I'm safe inside it. You're safer here than anywhere else in this city right now. A pause. That's not a threat. It's a fact. Lydia tightened her grip on her cane. The room felt smaller than it had 30 seconds ago. The rain against the window sounded like static, like white noise, like the world dissolving into interference. She thought about her father's hands on her shoulders, the specific way he held her when he was about to say something important. Listen, Liddy, not to what people say, to what they're not saying. That's where the truth lives. She thought about the scar on her neck and the man who had touched it like he recognized it. She thought about the word he'd said downstairs, that single, quiet, inexplicable word. Who protected me? She said. The room went absolutely still. What? He said. My medical expenses, she said. After my father died. I was 16, blind, no family. The state had me for 8 months. And then there was a scholarship, full ride, boarding school outside Philadelphia. And after that, Juilliard. All of it paid for. Anonymously. She paused. I always thought it was a foundation of some kind, a program I'd been enrolled in. She turned her face toward the part of the room where she thought he was standing. Who paid for it? A very long silence. Go to sleep, he said. There's a bedroom through the door on your left. You're safe tonight. That's not an answer. No, he said. It isn't. She heard him walk to the room's far door, the main entry. And she heard it open, and she heard him pause. Your father was a good man, Cassian Moretti said. One of the only ones I ever knew. The door closed. Lydia stood in the center of a penthouse room in a building locked down for a gang war, holding a white cane that was not quite what it appeared to be, and she thought about patience, about angles, about the difference between a situation that was lost and a situation that only looked lost. Outside, somewhere in the city, 7 men were dead, and the night was only getting started. And in the room behind her, a man she had been waiting 10 years to find had just walked out a door. without knowing that she had walked into that lobby on purpose, that her phone had not actually been dead, and that the vase she'd knocked over had not been an accident at all. She didn't sleep. The bedroom Cassian had pointed her toward was at the end of a short hallway off the main room. She'd mapped it by sound and touch inside of 4 minutes, hands trailing the walls, cane tip reading the floor. King bed, headboard against the north wall. 2 nightstands, a window she couldn't open. A bathroom with a door that didn't lock from the inside. Someone had removed the lock, or it had never been installed, and she wasn't sure which possibility unsettled her more. She sat on the edge of the bed with her coat still on and her cane across her knees, and she listened to the building. Below her, through the floor, she could feel more than hear the low-frequency movement of men, positions shifting, doors, the muted vibration of elevator cables running. The St. Regis had been converted into something else tonight. Not a hotel, not really, but a command post, and she was somewhere in the middle of it with no clear read on how many exits she'd be able to use if things went wrong. She thought about the vase. The way it had shattered had been exactly right. Not too loud, not too staged, just a woman who couldn't see the table, who'd been startled by the rain and the unfamiliar space. That was what they'd seen. That was what she needed them to keep seeing. She reached down and ran her fingers along the lower section of the cane's shaft, feeling for the faint seam her father had built into the design 16 years ago. Still there. Still solid. She pressed the heel of her palm against it once, lightly, feeling the internal mechanism respond. Then she let go and folded her hands in her lap. Her father had been a numbers man. That was what Cassian called him. What he'd never known, what almost no one had known, was that Raymond Hayes had also been something else entirely before the Morettis found him, before the accounts and the offshore structures and the years of making dirty money clean and invisible. Raymond Hayes had spent 6 years training people how to move through dangerous spaces without being seen, how to read threat levels through sound and air pressure, and the behavior of people who didn't know they were being watched. He'd taught his daughter everything. The bedroom door opened without a knock. She didn't move. "He wants you in the main room." Male voice, the young one from earlier. She'd cataloged his footfall by now, left heel slightly heavier than the right, some old injury or habit. Samuels walked differently, more even, more controlled. There were at least 3 others on this floor she hadn't yet fully tracked. "Tell him I'll be there in a minute," she said. A pause. He hadn't expected that. He said now? "I heard what he said," Lydia said. "I said a minute." The door didn't close. He was still there, waiting, probably uncertain whether to physically compel her, and equally uncertain whether he had clearance to do that. She let him sit in the uncertainty. 60 seconds, measured in her head. Then she stood, settled her coat, took her cane, and walked toward the door. He stepped aside for her. She noted the distance, the slight shift of air. In the main room, Cassian was standing at the window. She could hear rain still, though it had thinned since midnight. He wasn't alone. Samuels was positioned near the desk, and there was a third man she hadn't encountered before, breathing too loud, standing near the bar cart. Stress breathing. Whatever news had come in while she'd been sitting on the bed, it had shaken this third man badly enough that his body was doing it for him. "Sit down," Cassian said, this time not to her. The third man sat. Something heavy settled into a chair. "Tell her," Cassian said. "I don't—" the man started. "Tell her what you told me." A long pause. Lydia stood near the hallway entrance and waited. "The Romano family," the man said. He had a broad accent, outer boroughs, and his voice had the roughened quality of someone who'd been awake for 30 hours. "They've been watching you, not just tonight, for weeks. Maybe longer. They have a name." He stopped. "Go on," Cassian said. "They have your name," the man said, and Lydia realized he was talking to her. "Lydia Hayes, daughter of Raymond. They know you exist. They've known for—" He made a sound, something between a cough and a swallow. "They've known for at least 6 months." She kept her breathing even. "How?" she said. "We don't know." "You said weeks? Then you said months." A silence. She heard him shift in the chair. "Which is it?" she said. "We think months," Cassian said from the window. We think someone gave them your location 6 months ago. Someone inside your organization, she said. Yes. The same someone who sold out my father 10 years ago. The room was very quiet. Possibly, Cassian said. Lydia took one slow breath. She let it out through her nose, controlled, giving nothing away. So the person who had my father killed is still embedded in your operation, has been feeding information to your enemies for a decade, and has now pointed those enemies directly at me. That's what the evidence suggests. And you have no idea who it is. I have ideas, Cassian said, and something turned in his voice, something dark and grinding, like a gear catching wrong. I have ideas I can't act on yet because the evidence is circumstantial, and acting without proof in this organization means starting a war on 2 fronts instead of 1. You're already in a war on 2 fronts, she said. Lydia. His voice had dropped, quieter now, and somehow more dangerous for it. I need you to understand something. The ledger your father hid, the Romano family, believes you either have it or know where it is. They won't ask nicely. Why would I know where it is? Because Raymond Hayes loved his daughter, Cassian said, and because the kind of man he was, careful, methodical, always thinking 3 moves out, would not have disappeared with something that valuable without leaving a key for someone he trusted. The Romanos believe you're that key. A pause. I've believed it for years. There it was. She had wondered when that would surface. You've been watching me, she said. Not a question. Protecting you, he said. Same thing, depending on where you're standing. He didn't argue that. She heard him move from the window, cross toward the center of the room, stop maybe 8 feet from her. Your tuition, she said. My medical bills after the incident. The Braille literacy program that got me into the boarding school. That was all you. Yes. Why? Because your father asked me to. Her throat closed again. She managed it. Barely. He knew he was going to die, she said. He knew something was coming, Cassian said. He came to me 3 days before the night it happened. He said he'd found something wrong in the accounts, a pattern he couldn't explain. Money moving in ways he hadn't authorized, trails pointing back to Romano-connected banks. A pause. He thought someone was setting him up, making it look like he was skimming, laundering for the other side. He asked me to protect you if anything happened to him. He said, Cassian stopped. When he continued, the controlled blankness was back, harder than before. He said, you were the only thing in his life that mattered. The breathing in the room felt very loud to her, her own included. You believed him, she said, that he'd been set up? I believed him then. I was too slow to do anything about it. A pause that had weight in it, actual weight. Something he'd been carrying a long time. The hit came 2 days later. I was across town by the time I got there. Stop, she said. He stopped. She didn't want the details. She had her own version of that night, built from what she'd been told and what she'd pieced together over years, and she had survived it by keeping it in a particular shape. She didn't need it broken apart and rebuilt by someone else's memory of her father's last hours. The ledger, she said. What's actually in it? 10 years of Moretti financial infrastructure, Cassian said. Account numbers, shell companies, names attached to transactions that should never have names attached. Enough to destroy us legally if it went to the right people. But also, he paused, it has the Romano accounts woven through it. Your father wasn't just our man. At some point, he was managing parallel books for both families, brokering something we didn't know about until recently. He was working both sides. Or being used by both sides without his knowledge, Cassian said. We're not sure which. The man with the outer boroughs accent made a sound. You got something to add? Cassian said, not turning toward him. Lydia could tell by the direction of his voice. We don't know that, the man said. We're speculating. Marcus. Cassian's voice was very level. Why don't you get some air? Cassian. Get some air, Marcus. A pause. Then the heavy sound of the man standing, moving toward the main door, the door opening and closing. Gone. Lydia tracked him out of the room and filed that interaction away. The name, the resistance, the particular kind of pushback that came from someone who had something to protect in the conversation. "Who is he?" she said. "My financial director," Cassian said. "He took over the accounts after Raymond died." She let that sit between them for a moment. "He seems uncomfortable with this conversation," she said. "He's been uncomfortable since the Romanos hit the warehouse tonight," Cassian said. "That's not unusual. It's a bad night for everyone to be comfortable." "You trust him?" A pause. "I trust everyone exactly as far as I can verify," Cassian said. "Which is how I've stayed alive." "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "It isn't." She was beginning to notice a pattern. Samuels moved. She heard him shift near the desk, and then he said quietly, "Boss, Mercer's on the line, needs to talk to you directly." "Tell him 2 minutes." "He's saying it's about the docks, the second shipment." Cassian said nothing for a moment. She could hear him processing, calculating. "Tell him 2 minutes," he said again. Samuels moved away. She heard a door to an adjacent room open and close, giving them a version of privacy. "You should eat something," Cassian said to her. "There's food in the kitchen, the third door on the right from the hallway." "I'm not hungry." "When did you last eat?" She thought about it. A protein bar at 2 in the afternoon before the recording session. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're running on whatever is keeping you upright, and it's almost 2 in the morning. A pause. "Go eat something. We'll talk more when I'm off the phone." "What are we going to talk about?" "About what you know," he said, "and what you're going to tell me." She turned that over. "You think I'm hiding something?" "I think," Cassian said carefully, "that you are your father's daughter, and Raymond Hayes never showed all his cards. Not to anyone. Not even to me." A pause. "So yes, I think you know something you haven't said." She kept her face still. "I'll think about what I know," she said, "while I eat." She found the kitchen without difficulty, trailing her cane lightly along the wall. It was a full working kitchen. She could feel the size of it in the acoustics, smell the stainless and the coffee someone had brewed hours ago. She found the refrigerator, found bread, found what felt like cheese, and something wrapped in deli paper. She made herself eat standing up, slowly, listening to the building. Through the kitchen's exterior wall, she could hear the city. Even muffled by storm glass and height, New York at 2 in the morning had its own specific frequency. But tonight it was different. There were sirens, multiple sirens, not the routine one-at-a-time bleed of a normal night, but clustered, directional, moving in patterns she'd learned to read years ago. Multiple incident response. Someone was putting a lot of police in motion on the west side. The war was escalating. She was finishing the last of the bread when she heard it, a sound that was wrong in a very specific way. Not voices, not footsteps. Something else. A faint, repeated tapping from somewhere above the kitchen ceiling. Irregular. Then stopping. Then starting again. She put the food down. The building's upper floors, someone on the floor above moving in a pattern that didn't fit hotel staff or Moretti security. Too irregular. Stopping and starting the way someone stops and starts when they're trying to be quiet, when they're trying to move without being heard. She tracked it across the ceiling above her head, entering from the far east end, moving west, toward the stairwell that connected this floor to the one above. She went back to the main room. Cassian was on the phone, voice low, turned toward the window. Samuels was beside the desk. "There's someone on the floor above us," she said. Samuels looked at her. "Moving east to west," she said. "They've been at it for about 90 seconds. Irregular movement, stop-start, like they're checking corners." Samuels said, "We have the whole floor." "Which floor?" she said. A pause. 14. "We're on 14? "Yes." "Then someone's on 15, she said, "and I don't think they belong there." Samuels looked at Cassian. Cassian had the phone still at his ear, but he'd turned slightly and was watching her. She could tell from the direction of his attention, the quality of the silence he was giving her. "Mercer," he said into the phone. "Hold." Then to Samuels. "Check it." Samuels moved, fast, quiet. He was better at this than most, she noted. The door to the stairwell access opened and closed. Lydia stayed in the center of the room. Cassian was still watching her. "You heard that from the kitchen?" he said. "Yes." "Through the ceiling." "Through the ceiling," she confirmed. A pause. "My security team has audio equipment on every floor," he said. "Motion sensors in the stairwells." "Then your motion sensors have a gap somewhere," she said, "because whoever's up there has been moving for at least 2 minutes and you didn't know about it until I told you." The phone in his hand crackled. She heard Mercer's voice, small and compressed, saying something she couldn't make out. Cassian's body changed. Subtle shift of weight, the kind of movement that happens when news arrives that's bad in a specific way rather than a general way. "Where?" Cassian said into the phone. A pause. "How many?" Another pause. Longer. "Don't move until I say." He lowered the phone. "What is it?" she said. "The Romano family has people in this building," he said. "Not just above us. Lobby level. They came in with the hotel staff rotation at 1:30. The room felt very cold. "How many people do you have on this floor?" she said. 6. "And the Romanos?" He didn't answer immediately, which told her the answer was not reassuring. "Cassian?" she said. "How many?" "Mercer's count is 11, he said. "That's just the ones he can see." 11 against 6. On a lockdown floor in a building that had just been quietly compromised through a staff rotation. Someone had known the schedule, someone had known the timing, someone who had access to Moretti's security procedures. Someone inside. Lydia's hands were steady, her voice was steady. But underneath both of those things, her mind was running very fast through the layout she'd built, the exits she'd cataloged, the specific geometry of what was about to happen to this floor. The stairwell door crashed open. Not Samuel. 2 sets of footsteps. Wrong weight, wrong rhythm. And then Samuel's voice from somewhere behind them, muffled and cut short in a way that meant he was either unconscious or being restrained. The 2 men stopped inside the room. She heard the specific sound of weapons being leveled. The mechanical adjustment, the breathing that goes shallow when a finger moves to a trigger. "Nobody move," one of them said. She didn't move. She heard Cassian go very still. "We just want the girl," the second man said. His voice was flat, businesslike. Not a man who enjoyed this part, just a man doing a job. "Hand her over and the rest of this can wait for a better night." A long silence. "You know that's not happening," Cassian said. "Cassian." The first man said his name like a corrective, like a teacher with a slow student. "Look at your situation. Building's ours for the next 30 minutes until your cavalry arrives. We don't need to do damage here. We take her, we go. This ends clean." Lydia stood in the middle of the room and she thought about her father, about the last thing he had ever said to her the morning before that night, when he'd held her face in his hands and told her he needed her to remember something. She'd been 16. She'd thought he was being dramatic. "Whatever happens," he'd said, "don't let them see what you are. Not until the right moment. You'll know the moment." She thought, maybe not yet. Then the third man came in from the kitchen hallway. The direction she'd come from, the direction no one else in the room had been watching, because no one else had been mapping exits the way she had. And she revised that assessment. The third man grabbed her from behind, an arm across her throat, hand gripping her collar. Professional restraint meant to immobilize without immediately choking. She went limp. All of it. Every muscle, dead weight, instant and total. It was harder than it looked, and she'd practiced it for years. The man's grip adjusted immediately, compensating for the shift in her weight, and in that half second of adjustment, she felt exactly what she needed to feel. His center of gravity, his footing, the angle of his elbow. She filed it. She let him hold her, for now. "Tell your men to stand down," the first Romano soldier said to Cassian, "or we walk her out of here in pieces." Cassian's breathing had changed. She heard it from across the room, the specific texture of a man who was doing math he didn't like the answer to. "Let her go," he said. His voice was very quiet. "Let her go and I'll open a conversation with Aldo Romano directly. Whatever he wants to negotiate." "He's done negotiating," the first man said. "Then what does he want?" "The ledger," the second man said. "Where is it?" "I don't have it," Cassian said. "She does," the first man said. "Or she knows. Same difference." The arm across Lydia's throat tightened slightly. Not enough to cut air, just enough to communicate capability. A message. She registered it and let her body stay slack, and she thought, not yet. Not yet. There were two men with weapons she couldn't fully place, one man holding her and Cassian somewhere across the room, and the math wasn't right. Not yet. Tell me where it is, the man holding her said against her ear. Quiet, personal, almost gentle. Easy way or hard way? You don't strike me as someone who picks hard. Lydia said nothing. He increased the pressure. She felt her airway narrow. Where? He said. And from across the room, in the worst possible timing, the door opened and Marcus walked back in. Marcus, who had been sent out for air. Marcus, the financial director who had flinched at the wrong moments and pushed back on the wrong details, and whose footfall she had already filed away as something to remember. Marcus, who walked back into the room and looked at the three Romano soldiers and said nothing, did not shout, did not freeze, did not reach for a phone, just stopped in the doorway and looked at the scene in front of him and then looked at Cassian, and in the quality of his silence was the answer to every question that had been circling this room all night. Cassian said his name. Just that. Just his name, in a voice stripped of everything. Marcus looked at the floor. The arm across Lydia's throat didn't loosen. The weapons didn't lower. The rain kept coming down outside, and somewhere in the city the sirens were getting closer, and everything, Cezanne, all of it, every piece of the last 10 years, had just arrived at a point from which Cassian said Marcus's name a second time. Same voice, same stripped quality, like the word had been sanded down to bare wood. Marcus didn't look up. The first Romano soldier shifted his weight. Lydia felt it in the air, the subtle repositioning of a man whose situation had just improved unexpectedly. The arm across her throat stayed exactly where it was. Well, the first man said, that's convenient. Cassian hadn't moved. She could track him by his breathing, which had gone very slow and very deliberate. The breathing of a man overriding something physical, some instinct toward violence that would get everyone killed in the next 4 seconds if he let it out. Marcus, he said. Third time. Different inflection. Not a question, not a command. Something colder than either. Don't, Marcus said. His voice was broken at the edges. Not from guilt, she thought, from fear. The specific texture of a man who'd made his choice a long time ago and had spent every day since then waiting for this room. Don't do that. Don't say my name like that. How long? Cassian said. Marcus looked up then, his face. She couldn't see it, but she heard his breathing shift, heard the wet quality that meant his eyes had changed. It doesn't matter. How long? 7 years, Marcus said. Almost 8. The room absorbed that. 7 years. The Romano family had owned a piece of Moretti's financial director for 7 years, which meant every account restructuring, every shell company, every offshore move that Marcus had overseen in the years since Raymond Hayes' death had been visible to the other side. 7 years of intelligence, 7 years of positioning. Raymond knew, Cassian said. It wasn't a question. Raymond figured it out, Marcus said. 3 days before, yes, he found a transfer I'd buried in the Q3 reconciliation. $17,000 routed through a Cayman account he didn't recognize. A pause. He came to you instead of coming to me directly. That was his mistake. His mistake, Cassian said. If he'd come to me, I could have managed it. We could have... There were options, but he went to you, and then the Romanos knew he'd gone to you, and... Marcus stopped. You told them, Cassian said. You told them Raymond had come to me. You told them he was planning to run. He was planning to run, Marcus said. That part was true. He'd already moved money. Not yours, his own. Accounts he'd built over the years from commissions and percentages you'd paid him. He had exit documents for himself and for Lydia. He was 3 weeks from gone. The man holding Lydia hadn't loosened his grip, but he'd gone very still, listening. Professional enough to recognize that the conversation happening over her head was worth more than hurrying the timeline. You signed his death warrant, Cassian said. I reported what I knew to the people I worked for, Marcus said, and there was something horrible in the way he said it. Not defensiveness exactly, but the flatness of a man who had restructured his own understanding of what he'd done until it fit a shape he could live with. The Romanos made their own decision about what to do with that information. You knew what they'd do. Silence. You knew what they'd do, and you knew there was a 16-year-old girl in that house, Cassian said. His voice had dropped to almost nothing. And you reported it anyway. Marcus said, I'm sorry. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a significant height. Lydia felt the arm across her throat, and she felt her own heartbeat, and she thought about her father's hands on her face, and she thought, not yet. Not yet. If she moved now, she had one man down but two weapons still in the room, and Cassian between them and the door, and the math was still wrong. I need the ledger, the first Romano soldier said. Done waiting. We can finish the emotional portion of the evening another time. There is no ledger, Cassian said. There's always a ledger, the man said. Raymond Hayes built ledgers the way other men build houses. He couldn't stop himself. The question is where the last one is. He paused. Marcus tells us the girl knows. Lydia went very still inside the stillness she was already holding. Marcus, she said. His breathing hitched. He hadn't spoken directly to her yet, hadn't looked at the corner of the room where she was being held, or if he had, she hadn't heard him do it. Marcus, she said again, did you know about me? Before tonight? Did you know Cassian had been protecting me? A pause. Yes, he said. For how long? From the beginning, he said. I handled the initial fund transfers, the school, the medical bills. I set up the accounts. And you told the Romanos about those too. Silence was the answer. 6 months ago, she said. Someone gave them my location 6 months ago. That was you. They asked me to identify Raymond's known associates, Marcus said. Living ones. I gave them a list. I was on a list, she said. You were on a list, he confirmed, and his voice had gone completely flat, like he'd finally arrived somewhere beyond the reach of shame. I didn't know what they'd do with it. You've been telling yourself that for a long time, she said. Does it still work? No answer. The first Romano soldier made a sound, impatience, or something close to it. The ledger, he said again. Last time I'm asking politely. I don't have it, Lydia said. Where is it? I don't know where it is. I've never seen it. My father never told me about it. The arm tightened, her air narrowed to a thread. Try again, the man holding her said. She stayed limp, stayed still. Her right hand was at her side, cane grip loose in her fingers, and she was counting. Heartbeats, degrees of pressure on her throat, the angle of the arm across her chest. She doesn't know, Cassian said. She's blind. She's been living in a one-bedroom apartment in Inwood for 6 years. She teaches cello lessons to children on Saturdays. She's Raymond Hayes' daughter, the first man said. And Raymond Hayes hid 10 years of our financial infrastructure in something nobody's found in a decade. A man that careful doesn't leave his only kid exposed. He paused. So either she knows and she's not saying, or she doesn't know yet, but she'll figure it out. Either way, she comes with us. She doesn't go anywhere, Cassian said. Cassian. The first man's voice was almost gentle. You have one man in this room, and we have 3. And Marcus here has already called the rest of our people up from the lobby. You're going to have company in about 90 seconds. This is over. Let the girl go and walk away, and we can do the negotiating part next week when everyone's had some sleep. If she leaves this building with you, she doesn't come back, Cassian said. You know that, and I know that, and she knows that. Then we understand each other, the man said. Let's make this simple. The door to the stairwell opened. Not Romano soldiers. The footfalls were wrong, single set, and the door had opened from the outside too quietly, with the specific controlled motion of someone who knew how to open a door that shouldn't be making sound. A Moretti man. Her first thought, someone Cassian had positioned who'd found a way back in. Then the man stopped moving, and she heard his breathing, and she revised that assessment completely. It was Samuel's. But Samuel's was wrong. The evenness she'd cataloged in his footfalls was gone. He was favoring his right side now, dragging slightly on the left, and his breathing had the wet, irregular quality of a man who'd taken damage to his midsection. He was hurt, badly, maybe, but he was standing, and from the soft, almost inaudible click that came from his direction, he was also armed and he'd just made himself ready. "Samuels," the first Romano soldier said. He'd tracked him too. "You should be on the floor upstairs." "Yeah," Samuel said. His voice was rough, compressed against the pain. "I should be a lot of things." For 1 second, the room's attention fractured. 1 second was what Lydia had been waiting for. She didn't think. The body doesn't think when it's been trained. It executes. Her weight shifted from dead to active in a single motion, her left hand coming up and across to break the grip on her collar, while her right elbow drove back and up into the jaw of the man holding her. Not elegant, not clean, but the angle was right, and she felt his head snap sideways, and his arm released involuntarily on the left side, which was enough. She dropped, straight down, knees hitting the floor, and she pulled the cane across her body and felt for the seam, and in one motion that her hands knew better than her mind did, she released the internal mechanism, and the lower section of the shaft separated from the upper to reveal the blade her father had built into it 16 years ago. 6 inches. Single edge. Not meant for distance, not meant for exhibition, meant for the specific geometry of close quarters. The man she'd elbowed was recovering. She could hear him, 2 feet away and to her right, shaking his head, reaching. She drove upward from the floor with her shoulder into his midsection, blade leading, and felt the impact and heard the sound he made. And then she was past him, moving by sound, going left, away from the 2 soldiers with weapons who were now the primary problem. Gunshot. Single shot from Samuel's direction. The suppressed crack of it still loud in the enclosed space, and something fell to her right. Return fire. Louder, unsuppressed. She felt the air displacement of it, close. Samuels made a sound. "Samuels," Cassian said, and his voice had completely changed, stripped of control, raw. "I'm good," Samuel said, and the wet quality in it said that was probably not entirely true. Lydia was against the far wall. She had the blade in her right hand and she was tracking by sound. 1 Romano soldier down behind her, 1 somewhere near the center of the room, 1 unaccounted for. The first soldier's weapon had hit the floor when she'd driven through him. She'd heard it. Somewhere within 6 feet of her current position, she found it with her foot, crouched, retrieved it. She had never fired a weapon in her life. Her father had taught her the mechanics, the theory, the geometry of how a bullet moves and what it means to aim without being able to see the target. He had taught her this the same way he'd taught her everything, patiently, methodically, in the specific voice he used for things he hoped she would never need. She was going to need it. "The girl has a gun," the second Romano soldier said from somewhere to her left. Middle of the room. Cassian should be to her right. She tried to find him by his breathing, but there was too much noise now, Samuels's labored respiration, someone moving near the door. "Put it down," the second soldier said to her. "You can't see me." "I don't need to see you," she said. "I need to hear you." A pause. She tracked him by the pause, the specific silence of a man recalibrating his assessment of his situation. He was 8 feet away and slightly elevated, which meant he was standing on something, or the floor had a slight rise she hadn't mapped. She adjusted. "Cassian," she said, "here." His voice came from her right, closer than she'd placed him, 5 feet, maybe less. "I'm here." "Is anyone between me and the door?" A beat. "Marcus?" Cassian said. She'd forgotten Marcus. In the chaos of the room, she'd lost his position entirely. "Marcus?" she said. Nothing. "Marcus, I need to know if you're between me and the door." "He's gone," Samuel said from somewhere he'd managed to drag himself toward the wall. "He went out when it started. He had a head start." Gone. 11 Romano soldiers in the building and Marcus walking out ahead of them, going somewhere that was not here, taking with him whatever information he'd decided to take. She processed that in less than a second. "The second soldier," she said to Cassian. "Where?" 8 feet, 2 o'clock from where you're standing. He moved when you—" The door to the main corridor burst open. Not 2 men, not 3. She heard 5 sets of feet hit the room simultaneously, and she heard Cassian say something under his breath that was not a word she could print, and she heard Samuel struggle to reposition, and she held the weapon she'd never fired, and she understood with complete clarity that they had run out of... The lights went out. Not a power failure. She'd have heard the building's systems react, the HVAC change, the elevator mechanics shift. This was targeted. Someone had cut the power to this floor specifically, and the room went black, and she heard 3 of the 5 newly arrived men stop moving because they'd lost their visual reference. She hadn't lost anything. She moved. Left wall, tracking by memory, moving along the perimeter she'd mapped, toward the kitchen hallway. The soldiers were in the center of the room, recalibrating to darkness. She heard Cassian move too. He was fast. She registered that. Fast and quiet in the way of someone who'd learned to operate in bad conditions. "Cassian," she said, barely a whisper. "Kitchen," he said, from just behind her. They went through the hallway door. She pulled it closed and found the chair she'd noted earlier, one of 2 that flanked a small breakfast table, and she jammed it under the handle. It wouldn't hold, but it would buy seconds. "Samuel's," Cassian said. "Still in the main room," she said. "He couldn't move fast enough." Cassian said nothing for a moment. She heard what that cost him in his breathing. "He told me to go," she said, "before the lights cut. He shifted away from us. He was clearing our exit." A pause. "There's a service exit," Cassian said. "End of the kitchen, behind the refrigerator unit. It connects to the secondary stairwell, comes out at the loading dock level." "How far to the loading dock?" 3 flights down. 1 minute if we move." Something hit the hallway door. Hard. The chair held. "Move," she said. He moved. She followed his sound, his footsteps, his breathing, the displacement of air as he navigated the kitchen she'd already mapped. She heard him pull the refrigerator unit, the scrape of it on the floor, and then a door, and cold air came through, different quality than the kitchen, utilitarian, metal and grease and old concrete. Service stairwell. They went down fast. She kept her right hand on the railing and counted. 14 steps, landing, turn, 14 steps, landing, turn. He was a few steps ahead, and she matched his pace and didn't slow him down, and she heard him notice that, the slight hesitation in his stride that said he'd expected to have to wait for her. She didn't have time to be satisfied about it. Loading dock level. He hit a door, heavy fire door, steel frame, and it opened onto the smell of wet concrete and garbage and cold night air. The rain had thinned to a mist. She could hear the street, different here. Service alley, running alongside the building, connecting somewhere to 55th. He stopped. She stopped beside him. They were both breathing hard. She could feel his presence beside her. Close. The warmth of him. The specific gravity of a large man who'd been moving at controlled speed and was now making himself go still. "Car," he said. 60 feet to the right. Black. Keys are under the visor. "Your car." "Emergency position. I have them at 6 points across the city." A pause. "Can you—" He stopped himself. "Can I what?" she said. "Nothing," he said. She understood what he'd stopped himself from asking. Could she manage? Was she all right? The questions people asked when they forgot, or when they hadn't been paying attention. "I'm fine," she said. "Go." They moved to the car. He drove. She sat in the passenger seat with the blade back in its housing and the recovered weapon in her coat pocket, and she listened to the city move around them, tracking direction by sound, building the route in her head as he drove south. Neither of them spoke for 4 minutes. Then he said, "The cane." "Yes." "The blade in the cane." "Yes." "Your father built that." "Yes." A pause. She heard him adjust his grip on the wheel. "How long have you had it?" "Since I was 17, she said. "He gave it to me 8 months before he died. He said it was a birthday present." She paused. "I didn't understand what it was until after." "You've been carrying a weapon for 14 years, Cassian said. "I've been carrying a tool," she said, "for 14 years. He didn't respond to that distinction, but she heard him receive it. They were moving south on what sounded like 8th Avenue. She could tell by the specific rhythm of the cross streets, the distance between stoplights. He was heading somewhere specific. She let him. Marcus knew everything, she said. Every protection you built around me, every account, every move you made to keep me out of reach. She paused. He fed all of it to the Romanos over 7 years. Yes, Cassian said, which means whatever you plan to do next, they know about it. Whatever resources you think you have, they have a map of them. A pause. Yes, he said. So we have nothing, she said. No secure location, no resources they haven't already mapped, no move to make that they haven't already planned for. He didn't answer. Cassian, she said, we have nothing. We have you, he said. I don't have the ledger. I know, he said, but you know something. You've been sitting with something since the lobby. I could feel it. You've been managing what you know and what you show, and those are 2 different amounts. A pause. I've watched people hide things for 20 years. You're hiding something. She looked straight ahead through the windshield she couldn't see. Pull over, she said. What? Pull over. I need to tell you something, and I need to not be moving when I say it. He pulled over. The car stopped and the engine idled, and the city moved around them, taxis and distant sirens, and the city's 2 a.m. frequency. She turned toward him. Not for effect. She'd spent years not performing the gestures of sighted people. She turned because she wanted her voice to go directly at him. I have the ledger, she said. The car was very quiet. Not physically, she said. I don't have a book or a drive or a file, but I have it. She paused. My father spent 3 years, when I was 12 to 15, teaching me music theory. Specifically, he taught me to read and perform a series of compositions he'd written himself. He said they were etudes, practice pieces. He made me memorize them completely. Not just the notes, but every dynamic marking, every tempo variation, every notation in the margin. She stopped. I've been playing those compositions for 14 years. I performed one of them at my Juilliard audition. I've taught sections of them to students. She let that sit. 3 months ago, a professor in the music department who specializes in cryptography attended one of my recitals. He came to me afterward and said he'd noticed something in the structure of the second etude. He said the numerical patterns embedded in the notation were, his word, extraordinary. He asked if my father had been a mathematician. Cassian was not breathing. The compositions are the ledger, she said. My father encoded 10 years of financial records into a series of musical etudes and taught them to his blind daughter. And for 14 years I have been carrying the most dangerous document to New York inside my head, and I didn't know it. The silence stretched. When did you figure it out? Cassian said. 8 months ago, she said, when the professor showed me his analysis. 8 months, Cassian said. You've known for 8 months. Yes. And you didn't... He stopped. When he started again, his voice was controlled but only just. You walked into that hotel tonight on purpose. You broke that vase on purpose. I needed to find you, she said. I needed to find you before the Romanos found me, and I needed to do it in a way that looked like an accident because I didn't know yet who around you was compromised. I needed to see how you operated before I told you anything. You were testing me, he said. The words came out flat, scraped clean. I was being careful, she said. My father was careful, and it didn't save him because he trusted one wrong person. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. A long pause. And now, he said, now Marcus is in the wind with whatever he took from this building tonight, and the Romanos are going to move fast, and the only thing we have that they don't is 12 encrypted musical compositions that I have memorized note for note, and whatever we're going to do with that, we need to do it before morning. She paused. So I need to know something. What? He said. The professor, she said. The one who analyzed the etude. His name is Brennan. Dr. Elliot Brennan, NYU Music Theory Department. I need to know if he's still alive. A pause. Why wouldn't he be? Cassian said. Because I told him to stop his analysis 8 months ago, and I made sure he understood why. But 2 weeks ago, he left me a voicemail. He said he'd shared his initial findings with a colleague. He didn't say which one. She paused, and then he stopped returning my calls. Cassian had his phone out. She heard him dial, heard it ring twice, heard someone pick up on the other end. "I need a location on someone," Cassian said. "Fast. Dr. Elliot Brennan, NYU. Find out if he's—" A pause. He listened. His breathing changed. She heard him lower the phone. "Brennan," he said, "was found in his office at NYU this afternoon. The university reported it to the police at 6 p.m. A pause. "He's been dead for approximately 36 hours. 36 hours. She'd walked into that hotel lobby tonight thinking she was 3 moves ahead, thinking she'd controlled the timeline, the approach, the conditions under which she'd finally surface and make her move. 36 hours ago, someone had already found Brennan. Someone had already known that the ledger existed in encoded form. Someone had already started closing the circle. And she'd walked into that hotel thinking she was the one holding the map. She sat in the passenger seat of a car she couldn't see, in a city that was trying to kill her, with 14 years of the most dangerous financial intelligence and organized crime locked inside her memory. And the man sitting next to her, the man she'd spent 8 months deciding whether to trust, was the only resource she had left. She thought about her father. She thought about patience and angles and the difference between a situation that was lost and a situation that only looked lost. And she thought, this one might actually— She didn't let herself finish the thought. "Drive," she said. "Where?" Cassian said. "Somewhere they haven't mapped. Somewhere Marcus didn't know about." She paused. "Does that place exist?" A beat of silence. She heard him thinking. Not the comfortable thinking of a man with options, but the compressed, airless thinking of a man inventorying what's left after a flood. "There's a place in Red Hook," he said. "My father's. Before we moved operations uptown, before the organization was anything, he had a machine shop on Van Brunt Street. We haven't used it in 15 years. It's not in any account Marcus touched. It's not in any file." A pause. "I haven't told anyone about it in so long I almost forgot it existed." "Almost," she said. "Almost," he confirmed. "Go," she said. He drove. She tracked the route by sound and the particular way the car moved over different road surfaces. The smoother asphalt of the avenues giving way to the textured patch streets of lower Brooklyn as they crossed the bridge. The rain had stopped completely now, and the night had that washed electric quality that comes after heavy weather. Everything too clear, too sharp, the city's smells amplified by wet pavement and cold air. She used the drive to think. Brennan had been dead for 36 hours, which meant whoever had reached him had done it 2 days ago, 48 hours before she'd walked into the St. Regis, which meant the timeline she'd constructed, the careful sequence she'd planned over 8 months of preparation, had already been compromised before she made her first move. Someone had gotten to Brennan. Someone who knew about his analysis of the etude. Someone Brennan had shared his findings with. A colleague, he'd said in the voicemail. He'd shared with a colleague. She ran back through everything she knew about Brennan's world. The NYU music theory department, a small faculty, 11 or 12 full-time professors, a rotating roster of visiting scholars. She'd attended 2 department events in the months after his initial approach. She'd been careful, peripheral, gathering information without surfacing. There had been a visiting scholar, fall semester, a man who'd sat in on Brennan's seminar on mathematical structures and Baroque composition. She'd heard him speak twice. Precise diction, slight Eastern European inflection, the careful English of someone educated in it as a second language. She hadn't thought about him since. She thought about him now. "The Romanos," she said. "Do they have anyone with a background in academic music theory? Or cryptography with a musicology angle?" Cassian was quiet for a moment. "That's a specific question." "I know what it is," she said. "Why?" "Because Brennan shared his analysis with someone, and whoever it was understood what they were looking at well enough to recognize the value and report it up." She paused. "That's not a soldier. That's a specialist." She heard him processing that. "There was a man," he said slowly. "Romano brought someone in about a year ago, Eastern European. We couldn't get a full ID. He came in clean, no priors in any database we had access to. Used for financial analysis, we thought. Pattern recognition in transaction flows." A pause. We didn't know why Aldo Romano needed a pattern recognition specialist. Now you do, she said. The car slowed, stopped. She heard him cut the engine, and for a moment there was just the sound of Red Hook at 3 in the morning. Wind off the harbor. The distant mechanical complaint of something industrial. A dog somewhere on the block. "We're here," he said. She got out. Cold air hit her face, and she smelled the harbor. Salt and diesel and the particular waterlogged quality of a neighborhood that had been underwater once and hadn't entirely forgotten it. Her cane extended. She tracked the ground in front of her. Flat, cracked concrete, grit underfoot. A wide space. Parking lot. Or had been once. He took her arm. Not grabbing. The same light, functional contact from the hotel, offering a reference point rather than control. She took it, and they moved. The building was metal-sided. She could tell from the acoustics as they approached, sound bouncing off in a particular way. A rolling door that he unlocked with a key, the kind of key that was old enough to be a single cut rather than a chip. The door went up with the complaint of machinery that hadn't moved in years. Inside, oil and metal and old wood and the preserved cold of a space that didn't get enough heat. She heard her own footsteps differently immediately. High ceiling, concrete floor, large open space with objects distributed through it. The former machine shop exactly as advertised. He found a light. A single work lamp, the kind that clips onto things, and she heard the click of it and felt the faint warmth it put into the air a few feet away. "There's a workbench along the left wall," he said, "and a space heater somewhere. Give me a minute." She stood in the center of the space and let herself breathe. Properly, for the first time in hours. In through the nose, 4 counts. Out through the mouth, 4 counts. The way her father had taught her to recalibrate after a threat response. To bring the body back from the biochemical edge and let the mind get clear again. She heard him find the space heater, heard it click and begin to tick as the elements warmed. She heard him pull something, a stool, from the sound of it, across the floor. "Sit," he said. This time she did. He sat somewhere nearby, close enough for conversation. She heard him and the quality of his exhaustion, the deep, structural kind that had moved past adrenaline and into the body's reserves. He'd been running on threat response for hours, and it was catching up with him the way it always did. "The colleague Brennan mentioned," he said. "You already have a name." "Not a name," she said. "A voice, a physical impression, enough to identify if I hear him again." She paused. If the Romanos have a cryptography specialist and he's been working the music angle for a year, he's already made progress on decoding the compositions. He has Brennan's analysis, which was substantial. More than a starting point. "How long until they have the full ledger?" Cassian said. "I don't know. The encryption my father used wasn't standard. He invented it, essentially, over years of working with musical notation as a second language. A specialist could crack the underlying structure eventually, but eventually could be 3 months or 3 years. She paused. "What they know right now is that I'm the key, that I have the memorized source material, that taking me and making me perform the compositions under controlled conditions, recorded, would give them everything they need." She let that land. "That's why they want me alive." Cassian said nothing for a moment. "For how long?" he said. She understood the question he wasn't finishing. For how long would they want her alive? Before the recording was made and the ledger was decoded and she became a liability rather than an asset. "Not long," she said. His breathing changed, the slow, controlled thing he'd been doing with it since the hotel tightened. "Then, here's what I need to know," she said. "The Romano's operation. The parts Marcus didn't know about. The operational details he wouldn't have had access to because they were need to know. Aldo Romano's primary location, his inner structure, the people he trusts most, and why." She paused. "Because what we have is 12 compositions that will destroy the Romano organization if the right people see them. Not just the financial exposure. The names attached to the accounts are enough to end careers, bring federal cases, turn people who currently have no incentive to cooperate into people who cooperate very quickly." She paused. "We don't need to win a war. We need to win one night." A silence. "You want to take it to them," Cassian said. "Marcus is with them," she said. "Right now, tonight, he's reporting everything he knows. They'll move on us by morning because they'll know we have nothing left to work with. She paused. So we move first, before dawn, before they've finished setting up whatever they're planning. She paused again. Can you put together a team in the next 2 hours? I have 6 men I'd trust with this, he said. Without Marcus in the network, I can't vouch for anyone else. A pause. 6 men against Romano's full operation. 6 men and me, she said. The silence was a particular kind, the kind that comes from a man revising his understanding of something. Lydia, he said, and the way he said it was different from every other time he'd said her name. Not controlled, not managed. What happened in that hotel room? The way you moved, the blade, what you did to that soldier? My father taught me, she said. Same way he taught me the music, same patience, same method. She paused. He used to say the two things were related, that both required you to build a complete map of your environment in your head and operate from that map rather than from what you could see in front of you. She paused. He was right. Another silence. 6 men and you, Cassian said, and 12 encrypted compositions inside your head. And whatever leverage you can pull in 2 hours, she said. People who owe you. People who have reason to want Romano contained. I don't need an army. I need enough chaos to get us into Romano's primary location and enough time inside to get what we need. What do we need? He said. The specialist, she said. The man who analyzed Brennan's work. He'll have the partial decryption, whatever Brennan gave him, and whatever he's developed since. I need that analysis because it's the fastest path to converting the compositions into something readable by people who aren't musicians. She paused. And I need Marcus. Marcus, Cassian said. He spent 7 years feeding information to the Romanos, she said, which means he knows their infrastructure from the inside. He knows the accounts, the shell companies, the names. He corroborates the ledger from the outside, me from the inside, him from the outside. Together, that's enough to take to a federal prosecutor and make a case that doesn't need a courtroom. A pause. But only if he's willing. He's not going to be willing, Cassian said. He will be, she said, when he understands what the alternative is. She heard Cassian stand. Move. The specific pacing of a man who'd made a decision but was still working out the shape of it, walking the edges to see if they held. Romano's primary location, he said. He rotates between 3 properties. But on a night like this, active conflict, moving operations, he contracts. He goes to ground in one place. A pause. A building in Sunset Park. He's owned it through a shell since 2019, full floor, private access. The building staff are all his people. A pause. That's where Marcus will be. That's where the specialist will be. That's where Romano will be running his operation from tonight. How many men? She said. On a night like tonight? 20, maybe 25. She let that number sit. 25 against 6, plus her. In an unfamiliar building, in the dark, with no logistics chain and no backup, and 2 hours to get ready. Her father's voice from somewhere. Patience and angles. She held on to it. Call your men, she said. I need paper and something to write with. You can't... He stopped himself again. The same catching up she'd felt in the car, the same revision. Right. What kind of paper? Anything, she said. I'm going to dictate. You're going to write. She paused. We have 12 compositions. Each one contains encoded data in a specific format. I'm going to reconstruct the decryption key from memory, the structure my father used, how the notation maps to numerical values, which instruments in the score carry data versus which carry decoys. She paused. It'll take about an hour. And then what? He said. And then we have something to offer that's worth more than a war, she said. We don't need the Romanos destroyed. We need them defanged. There are people, federal people, who have wanted clean leverage on the Romano organization for years. If we can get that material to the right desk before morning, the Romano organization won't have an operation left to fight us with. The space heater was ticking steadily. Somewhere outside, the harbor wind moved against the metal walls. You've been planning this for 8 months, Cassian said. Yes. You knew the whole time. Not the whole time, she said. I knew what I had. I didn't know how to use it until I understood all the pieces. She paused. I needed to find you, and I needed to find out whether you could be trusted. And I needed to see how the Romanos reacted when I surfaced, because their reaction would tell me what they already knew. She paused. I got answers to all 3 questions tonight. A pause. And? He said. And you can be trusted, she said, conditionally. Something moved in the air between them that she didn't have a precise name for. Start calling your men, she said. I'll start on the decryption key. He made calls. She listened to his voice, low, clipped, giving minimal information over the phone because phones were not secure and he knew it, while she sat on the stool and rebuilt her father's cipher from memory. She didn't have paper yet, but she didn't need it yet. She ran through the first composition in her head, measure by measure, feeling the structure of it the way she'd felt it since she was 12 years old. And this time, instead of hearing music, she read numbers, account identifiers, transfer codes, the names her father had embedded in the time signatures and key changes like insects in amber, preserved perfectly, unchanged by 14 years of her carrying them without knowing what they were. 4 calls. 40 minutes of logistics, meet points, equipment requests kept abstract enough to survive interception. She tracked his side of every call and built a picture of the men from how he spoke to them. 2 were older, steadier, asked practical questions. 1 was young and too eager, and Cassian managed him carefully. 1 didn't speak much, but the silences were the silences of competence rather than hesitation. When he was done, he found paper, a yellow legal pad, the kind that had probably been in this shop since his father's era, and sat beside her. Ready, he said. She began to dictate. It took 53 minutes. By the end, his hand had cramped twice, and she'd heard him shake it out without stopping, and the legal pad had filled past its first dozen pages. She ran through all 12 compositions, extracting the embedded data in sequence, and when she finished, she was wrung out in a way she hadn't expected. 14 years of carrying something without knowing its weight, and now she knew, and the knowing was its own kind of exhaustion. That's it, she said. He looked at what he'd written. She heard him turn pages, slowly at first, then faster, the sound of a man encountering something he hadn't expected. These names, he said. Yes. These are... He stopped. Yes, she said again. Some of these people are not in organized crime, he said. His voice had gone flat with something. Shock, maybe, or the specific version of it that comes from finding out the corruption goes deeper and wider than your worst estimate. I know, she said. My father knew. That's why they killed him. A silence. Where do we take this? He said. I have a contact, she said. A federal prosecutor, Jenna Waris, Southern District. I've been building to this approach for 4 months. She doesn't know I exist yet, but she's been working a parallel investigation into Romano's financial structure for 2 years, and she has nothing clean enough to use. She paused. What I have is clean. It's cleaner than anything she's ever seen because my father built it to be irrefutable. He was thinking about exactly this, not just about hiding information, but about creating something that could be weaponized legally. She paused. I need an hour with her, that's all. It's 4 a.m, he said. I know what time it is, she said. Call her anyway. He looked at her. She could feel it. You have her number, he said. I have her office number, her cell, and her home address in Park Slope, she said. I've been careful. A pause. You've been very thorough, he said. My father was thorough, she said. I learned from him. Something moved in his voice when he said, he would have, and then he didn't finish it. I know, she said. She didn't need him to finish it. Outside, the first suggestion of pre-dawn began. Not light she could see, but a change in the harbor sound, the particular way the water moves differently in the hour before morning. Her 6 men would be assembling. Waris would need to be contacted. Marcus was somewhere in a Sunset Park building with Aldo Romano and a cryptography specialist in the partial remains of her father's ledger. And she had the complete version in her head and on 53 pages of a yellow legal pad written in a crime boss's cramped handwriting. She stood from the stool. We need to move in the next 40 minutes, she said. Before Romano knows we're not running. The men won't all be here in 40 minutes, Cassian said. The ones who are here are enough to start, she said. The rest can follow. She paused. I'm going to the Sunset Park building. Lydia. I'm going, she said. With you or without you? But it'll go better with you. A pause that lasted exactly as long as it took him to understand she meant it. You realize, he said slowly, that if this doesn't work, it'll work, she said. How do you know? Because my father spent 3 years encoding this into music and 14 more years keeping me alive by making sure I didn't know I had it, she said. He didn't do all of that for it to not work. She paused. He did it for tonight. He planned for tonight from the day he figured out what Marcus was. She paused. He just didn't know he wouldn't be here for it. The space heater ticked. Cassian picked up the legal pad. She heard him roll it, secure it somehow. The cars will be here in 20 minutes, he said. Good, she said. You should know, he said, and his voice had dropped to the register it used when it was not performing anything at all. Not control, not authority, just the voice underneath all of it. What I said in the lobby, when I saw your scar. She waited. I said it because he made me promise, Cassian said. Raymond, the night he came to me. The night he told me something was wrong before the hit. He said, if anything happened to him, and if you were ever in danger, and if I ever found you. He stopped. He said to tell you that everything he built for you, that the music was yours, that you'd know what to do with it. A pause. He said, tell her she's mine, meaning his daughter, his work, his trust. A pause. I wasn't claiming anything. I was delivering a message. The machine shop was very quiet. I know, she said. Her voice was steady, and she was grateful for that because nothing else about this moment was. I know what he meant. She picked up her cane. 20 minutes, she said. Then we go. Outside, Red Hook was beginning to breathe again, the harbor coming to life in the dark before morning. And somewhere in Sunset Park, a man named Aldo Romano was making plans that were about to become worthless, and Marcus was sitting with 7 years of betrayal and not enough time left to spend it, and a specialist with Eastern European diction was bent over a partial decryption of music that he would never get to finish. The 6 men arrived in 18 minutes. Cassian briefed them in 2. She listened and built her own picture of the Sunset Park building from the details he pulled from memory. Access points, floor layout, the guard rotation Marcus would have described to Romano in detail. She asked 2 questions, and both men who answered did so without hesitation or a second look in her direction, which told her Cassian had said something to them before she'd come within earshot. She didn't ask what. It didn't matter. What mattered was the building, the floor, the room where Aldo Romano would be sitting at the center of his operation, managing a gang war he thought he was winning, with a man who knew everything about the Moretti organization sitting across from him, and a specialist who was close to cracking 14 years of encoded music. What mattered was getting there before the specialist got any closer. They went in 2 cars. She rode with Cassian and 2 of the others, the older one, Reyes, who'd asked the practical questions, and the young one, whose name was Dell, and who was sitting on the energy of someone who hadn't yet learned that the energy killed you faster than the opposition. 6 minutes to Sunset Park. The pre-dawn streets were as empty as New York ever got. She felt the car slow as they approached. Talk me through the entry point, she said. Loading access on the south side, Reyes said. From the front seat. Service elevator goes direct to 12. Romano's on 12. Guard at the loading access? 2, usually. Tonight, probably 3. Cameras? 4 on the exterior. Cassian's man took the feed offline 10 minutes ago. We have a 12-minute window before their tech notices and reroutes. How long to 12 from the loading access? 4 minutes if we move clean. We move clean, she said. The car stopped. She got out onto concrete. Different texture from Red Hook. Finer grit, newer surface. City block? Commercial. The building close on her right, she could feel its mass. Cassian was beside her without being asked. Stay close, he said quietly. I'll be right behind you, she said. Lydia. I know what I'm doing, she said. Trust me or don't, but decide now. A pause no longer than a heartbeat. I trust you, he said. The loading door was already open. Someone had handled that. She didn't ask how. 6 people moving in controlled sequence, her in the middle of the formation, Kane collapsed and stowed in her coat. Because this was not a space for navigation tools. This was a space for the map in her head and the blade in her hand, and 14 years of knowing exactly where she was in any room she'd ever entered. The service elevator. She counted seconds. 3 floors, 4. The mechanism slow and old. Floor 12. The doors opened on a different air. Warmer, close, the specific pressure of a space where many people had been for many hours. She heard voices immediately, 2 or 3 overlapping, a radio somewhere, the sound of equipment. An operational floor. Reyes went first, then Dell, then 2 others she'd cataloged as Mercer too, and a man who hadn't given a name, who moved so quietly she'd had to track him by air displacement since they'd left Red Hook. Cassian stepped out beside her. The corridor ahead was maybe 60 feet. 3 doors on the left, 2 on the right, and at the end a larger door that was where the voices were coming from. They got 40 feet before the door at the end opened. Not a guard. A man in a suit who stopped in the doorway and looked at the 6 people in his corridor, and at Lydia Hayes specifically, and then said, in a voice she recognized immediately, precise diction, Eastern European inflection, "She's here." Not surprise, not alarm, announcement, like he'd been told to watch for her, like someone had told him exactly what she looked like and what she'd be carrying. The door behind him opened wider, and the corridor was suddenly full of people, and Lydia understood, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, that they had been expected. That Romano had known they were coming. That someone, not Marcus hadn't had time, but someone in those 18 minutes while the 6 men had been briefed and the cars had been loaded, someone had made a call. Dell was the one she'd flagged. The young one, too eager, the energy that killed you. She heard him make a small sound behind her shut, not fear, something more complicated than that. The sound of a person arriving at a thing they'd been trying to avoid. Cassian heard it too. She felt him turn. And from the end of the corridor, Aldo Romano's voice, she'd never heard it before, but it was unmistakably the voice of a man who had lived long enough in authority that authority had become indistinguishable from his actual self, said, "Hello, Cassian, put the weapons on the floor. I have something you should hear." A pause. "Your girl's been lying to you. Not about the ledger." Another pause, and his voice held something that in another context might have been satisfaction. The corridor held its breath. Lydia counted 6 Romano men visible from her position. She could track them by breath and weight and the specific pressure of armed people in an enclosed space. The specialist stood in the doorway at the end. Romano's voice had come from the room beyond, which meant he hadn't stepped out, which meant he was either very confident or very well protected, or both. Dell was behind her and to the left. Still hadn't moved, still making that small sound that wasn't quite breathing. Cassian's voice, when it came, was the voice from underneath everything, stripped of management, stripped of performance. What did he tell you? He wasn't talking to Romano. He was talking to her. The corridor was completely silent except for the ambient operational noise from behind the door at the end. Radios, a laptop, someone on a phone who'd gone quiet when the situation in the corridor changed. "Cassian," she said, "what did you lie about?" "Let Romano finish his sentence first," she said. "I'd rather hear it from you." She took a breath, let it out slowly. The blade was in her right hand. She'd palmed it in the elevator before the doors opened, out of a habit that was older than conscious thought. Her left hand was empty and loose at her side. "I told you I found out about the ledger 8 months ago," she said, "when Brennan approached me after the recital." "Yes," Cassian said. "I found out 4 years ago," she said. "Not from Brennan. From my father's attorney, a man named Coates, who held a sealed letter in escrow with instructions to deliver it on the 10th anniversary of my father's death. The letter explained everything, the compositions, the cipher, the structure of the encoding, and it told me to find you." She paused. "I spent 3 years preparing, building the cover, getting close enough to people in both organizations to understand the internal structures, positioning myself where I'd be found rather than where I'd have to search." A pause. Brennan was useful because his analysis gave me corroborating documentation that wasn't just my word. But I didn't need him to know what I had. The corridor was absolutely still. 4 years, Cassian said. Yes. You've known for 4 years, and you waited. I wasn't ready, she said. And the window wasn't right. And I didn't have enough information about who inside your organization was compromised. She paused. I do now. From the end of the corridor, Romano said, This is a lovely conversation, but it doesn't change your position. Cassian's breathing had shifted. She could hear him processing the revision. 4 years versus 8 months, the scale of the preparation, the architecture of patience required to live with that knowledge for 48 months without surfacing it. She let him process. She didn't have anything to add that would make it easier. The weapons, Romano said. On the floor. Nobody moved. I have 9 men in this corridor, Romano said. You have 5 and a blind woman. Put the weapons down. 6, Lydia said. A pause. 6 men and a blind woman, Romano said, and his voice had the texture of a man tolerating something he found slightly tedious. The math doesn't change. Dell, she said. From behind her, Dell made a sound. I need you to make a decision, she said. Right now, not in 30 seconds. Now. She kept her voice level, not angry, not accusing, just clear. The voice her father had used when he was teaching her something that mattered. Whatever they offered you, it's gone the moment this ends badly. You know that. A pause that lasted 5 full seconds, which was a very long time in a corridor with 9 weapons trained on 6 people. They said they'd move my family, Dell said. His voice had cracked somewhere along the way and hadn't fully recovered. 23 years old, she estimated. Maybe 24. My mother and my sister. The Romanos have people near them. They said if I didn't... Where are they? Cassian said. Queens, Dell said. Astoria. Cassian said a name. One of the men she'd catalogued as reliable. The older one, Reyes. She heard Reyes already moving, already on his phone, already giving an address before Cassian finished speaking. The system of a man who'd spent 20 years building loyalty through exactly these moments, when loyalty was expensive and the bill came due all at once. Dell's breathing had gone ragged, relieved or guilty or both. Stay behind Lydia, Cassian said to him. Not punishment, not contempt, just placement. Then to Romano, you have 9 men. I have 5, plus Dell, plus Lydia. The math has never been what wins these things, and you know it. You've been in this business long enough to know it. A long pause. What I know, Romano said, is that the woman behind you is carrying 14 years of my financial exposure in her head. What I know is that she walked into your hotel tonight with a plan she didn't tell you about. What I know is that the ledger, when we decode it, has enough on both of us to end both of our operations permanently. A pause. Which is why the intelligent move, for both of us, is to let my specialist finish his work, destroy the ledger, and go back to doing business. The ledger doesn't expose just organized crime, Lydia said. Romano was quiet. You know what else is in it, she said. My father knew what he was encoding, and he encoded all of it. The accounts that go sideways into political infrastructure, the transfers that funded things that can never be called what they were, the names that appear in financial records at the exact same time certain investigations got quietly closed or certain contracts quietly redirected. She paused. That's why he died. Not because he was running, because he was the only person alive who had all of it in one place and understood what it meant. The room at the end of the corridor had gone completely silent, even the laptop and the phones. Destroying the ledger, she said, doesn't help you. Your specialist has already been working with Brennan's partial analysis. You already have pieces of it in documentation. The moment this night ends with bodies and a cover-up, those pieces become evidence in a federal investigation that is already open. She paused. The only version of tonight that ends with you protected is the one where what my father built is used the way he intended. Selectively. Surgically. Against the people who most need to be afraid of it. She paused one final time. Not you, Mr. Romano. The people above you. The ones who told you to have my father killed in the first place. The silence that followed was the longest of the entire night. She heard Romano move, the first time she'd tracked him moving, a chair shifting, weight redistributing. A large man, she gauged, carrying the particular stillness of someone who had learned to move as little as possible when thinking. "You're saying you'd protect my interests," Romano said. "I'm saying my father built a weapon precise enough to be aimed," she said, "and I'm the only person who can aim it. And I'm not interested in destroying every criminal organization in New York. I'm interested in the people who gave the order that killed my father and then spent 10 years pretending he was a footnote." She paused. "Give me Marcus. Give me your specialist and his documentation. Walk your men out of this corridor, and I'll give you the names of 3 people whose removal from the landscape will make your next 10 years considerably easier." Another silence. She heard him breathing. "And Moretti?" he said. She didn't answer. She let Cassian answer. "A border," Cassian said. "Defined and respected. No more warehouse hits, no more staff rotations into each other's buildings." A pause. "We're both smaller than we were 10 years ago. The city has changed. You know this." "You'd accept a treaty," Romano said. "I'd accept a treaty with terms I can enforce," Cassian said. The corridor held for 3 more seconds. She counted them. Then Romano said something in Italian she didn't catch, and she heard movement at the far end. His men redistributing, stepping back, not laying down weapons, but creating space. "Marcus," Romano called. From inside the room, footsteps. She heard Marcus before she saw him. The heavy left heel, unchanged from the hotel, the specific signature of a man who'd been carrying guilt so long it had changed the way he walked. He stopped somewhere near the end of the corridor. She spoke before Cassian could. 7 years, she said. Marcus said nothing. "Did you believe they'd leave her alone?" Cassian said. His voice was very quiet. The kind of quiet that was the last state before something irreversible. After Raymond, "Did you think it was over?" "I thought," Marcus started. "Don't," Cassian said. A pause. "The accounts," Lydia said. "Everything you managed for Romano's side. I need the full record, not what you remember, not a summary, the actual documentation." "I don't have it here," Marcus said. "Where is it?" A pause. "A storage unit in Greenpoint," he said. "Unit 47. The key is—" He stopped. She heard him reach into clothing, heard a small metallic sound. "Here." Someone took it. Reyes from the movement. "You'll give a complete deposition," Lydia said. "To Jenna Juarez, Southern District. Everything. Romano, the Morettis, the transfers, the names, the dates. All of it." "If I do that," Marcus said, "I'm gone." "Yes," she said. "You are." A pause. "Witness protection," he said. "I need—" "That's between you and Juarez," she said. "I'm not your attorney and I'm not your handler. But the deposition happens. That's not a negotiation." She heard him nod, the slight change of air, the shift of his head. Then his footsteps, moving away, back into the room at the end of the corridor, being managed by Romano's people, or choosing to manage himself. It didn't matter which. The specialist was next. He came out of the room without being asked, which told her he'd been listening and was smart enough to understand the landscape. He stopped in front of her. She could tell from the direction of his careful breathing, the slight Eastern European formality in the way he'd positioned himself. "The documentation," she said. "On the laptop," he said. "All of it. Brennan's original analysis and my extensions." A pause. "It's more complete than you might expect." "How complete?" she said. 60, perhaps 65% of the first 4 compositions decoded." A pause, and something moved in his voice that was not quite admiration, but was in the neighborhood of it. "Your father was extraordinary, the cipher he built. I have a doctorate in applied cryptography, and it took me 11 months to get this far." A pause. "You've been carrying it your whole life." "I've been carrying music," she said. "That's different." A silence. "Get the laptop," she said. "You're going to walk me through everything you have, and then you're going to help me convert the remaining compositions into readable format, because I need it done before the morning, and your 60% gives us a significant head start." "I'll need—" he started. Whatever you need, tell Cassian, she said. He'll get it. She heard him hesitate, weighing her, she knew, reassessing the whole landscape of the night from this new angle. All right, he said. And that was the Romano operation, folded in a corridor in Sunset Park at 4:30 in the morning without a single shot fired. Not because the threat hadn't been real, but because she had spent 4 years making sure that when this moment came, violence would be the most expensive option in the room rather than the easiest. Her father had taught her that too. They worked through the dawn in the machine shop in Red Hook. Cassian had found a second lamp and someone had produced coffee from somewhere, and the specialist, his name was Todor, she learned, and he'd been hired by Romano 18 months ago through a Budapest intermediary. Worked at the laptop while she sat beside him and performed the compositions from memory, section by section, while he cross-referenced against his decryption matrix and called out the values, and she confirmed or corrected. It was the strangest thing she had ever done. She played music she had played 10,000 times, in lesson rooms and practice halls and concert spaces, and for the first time heard it as what it actually was. Her father's voice, encoded and preserved and aimed at exactly this morning, this room, this table with a man she hadn't known a year ago bent over a keyboard beside her. Cassian stayed. He didn't have to. His men had dispersed, the building was secure, Romano had retreated to his Sunset Park floor to manage whatever came next in whatever way he'd manage it. But he stayed, sitting somewhere behind her in the machine shop, present in the way that large, quiet men are present, and she found that she didn't mind. At 6:14 in the morning, Todor said, "That's everything." She stopped. The shop was very quiet. "You're certain," she said. "Every account, every transfer, every name," Todor said. "The encoding is fully resolved. I can generate a readable document in any format you specify in about 20 minutes. A pause. "What format does your prosecutor prefer?" "Ask her yourself," Lydia said. "Call Cassian's phone." She heard Cassian find his phone, heard him dial the number she gave him, heard it ring 4 times before a woman answered. Sleep, rough voice, wary, a prosecutor's instinct to be guarded at any hour. "Warris," the woman said. "My name is Lydia Hayes," Lydia said. "My father was Raymond Hayes. You've been trying to build a case on the Romano organization for 2 years, and you can't get clean evidence because the financial infrastructure is buried in shell layers your forensic accountants keep losing track of." A pause. "I have the source documentation, all of it, plus a cooperating witness who managed the accounts for both sides for 7 years. A pause. "I need 2 hours of your time, and I need it today." A silence on the other end that lasted long enough to tell her Warris was already awake in the way that matters, mind running, not just body. "Who are you?" Warris said. "I just told you." "Raymond Hayes' daughter," Warris said slowly. "Raymond Hayes, the accountant." "Raymond Hayes, the financial architect," Lydia said, "who spent 11 years encoding everything he knew into a series of musical compositions and taught them to his blind daughter and was killed before he could tell her why." A pause. "I've known why for 4 years. I've been getting ready." A pause. "I'm ready." Another silence. 2 hours, Warris said. "My office, 8 a.m. "I'll be there," Lydia said. She handed the phone back to Cassian. She heard him take it and click it off and then not speak for a moment. "She'll want the Moretti accounts too," he said. "Everything in the ledger. It's both sides." "I know," Lydia said. "You're giving her ammunition to dismantle what's left of my organization," he said. "I'm giving her ammunition to dismantle the people above both organizations," she said. "The ones who've been using both of you as infrastructure for 30 years. She paused. "The Moretti name survives this. Smaller, watched, with less room to operate. But it survives." She paused again. "That's the best I can offer you." She heard him take that in. "It's more than I had 6 hours ago," he said. "Yes," she said. "Lydia." She waited. "What your father said in the letter," Cassian said. "The instructions. Find me. Use me." A pause, and his voice had the underneath quality again, the one without performance. "Did he say why? Why me specifically? Why not another route? Why not go directly to a federal contact? Why not use a journalist? Why not?" "He said he trusted you," she said. Whatever that's worth, coming from a man who worked for you for 11 years and watched how you operated and understood the difference between what you are and what you do. She paused. He said you were the only person in his life, outside of me, who he believed would hold to something if he asked you to. The machine shop held that. He asked you to protect me, she said, and you did. For 10 years, without being asked again, without any confirmation that he'd intended it to be that long or that involved. You just kept doing it. She paused. That's why he chose you. Cassian said nothing. She heard him stand from wherever he'd been sitting and cross the floor and stop, close to her, the same proximity as the hotel lobby, that first proximity, close enough for her to feel the warmth of him against the shop's cold air. He didn't touch her. She didn't move toward him. But the space between them had changed from what it had been at the beginning of the night, and they both understood that, and neither of them needed to name it. Samuels, she said. Reyes went back, Cassian said. He's alive. Took her round to the shoulder. He's at a private clinic in Bay Ridge. A pause. He'll be angry about missing the rest of it. Tell him what he missed wasn't as interesting as it sounds, she said. Something moved in Cassian's voice. The compressed almost laugh from the hotel lobby, more fully formed this time. He won't believe that, he said. No, she said, but tell him anyway. She stood from the stool and found her cane and extended it, and stood for a moment in the center of the machine shop where Cassian Moretti's father had built something from nothing in a city that didn't ask where things came from, only whether they worked. The space smelled like oil and old metal and the specific brand of coal that belongs to places that have been waiting a long time for something. She thought about her father, not the version of him that existed in other people's accounts, the numbers man, the financial architect, the man who'd built a hidden weapon and died before he could fire it. She thought about the version that was hers, the hands on her face, the patience in his voice when he was teaching, the way he'd laughed at things she couldn't see and described them to her, not as compensations, but as gifts. Here is what this looks like, Liddy. Here is how it moves. You're not missing it. You're getting a different version of it, and the different version is yours. She thought about the 14 years she'd spent carrying music that was also a weapon, playing it for audiences who heard beauty in it, and how neither of those things canceled the other out. It had been both. It had always been both. She thought, I hope you knew it would work. I hope you spent whatever time you had left knowing it would work. She didn't say that out loud. She kept it where it belonged. At 7:45, Cassian drove her to the Southern District office in Lower Manhattan. The city had fully woken by then. The particular organized chaos of New York on a weekday morning, buses and taxis and people moving with the specific determined efficiency of a city that had been running this same play for 100 years and knew all the parts. She could hear it all. She always could. They didn't talk much on the drive. There was a specific kind of quiet that exists between people who have been through something together and don't need to perform the having been through it. It simply sits between them, acknowledged, factual, like a piece of furniture that belongs in the room. He stopped in front of the building. I'll wait, he said. This will take most of the day, she said. I'll wait, he said again. She got out, extended her cane, found the building with the cane tip and the sound of foot traffic converging on an entrance. Lydia, he said. She turned. Your father, he said. He was right about you. Whatever he thought you'd be able to do with this, he undersold it. She stood on the sidewalk in the early morning of a city that was still sorting out what had happened the night before, and she held that for a moment. The specific weight of being seen by someone who had known the man she'd spent her whole life trying to understand. He was right about you, too, she said, or I wouldn't be standing here. She went into the building. Jenna Waris was already in her office, coffee in hand, two colleagues she hadn't introduced yet arranged around a conference table. The room smelled like paper and old carpet and the specific tired urgency of people who had been working something hard for too long and could feel the shape of a break in the distance. Lydia sat down. She put her cane across her knees and folded her hands and said, Here's what you're going to receive today. And she told them, all of it, from the beginning, in the order that made it most comprehensible, not the order in which she'd lived it, but the order that made the architecture visible, that showed the design her father had built, and the 14 years it had spent waiting to be used, and the single night in which it had finally been. She talked for 2 hours. Waris and her colleagues asked questions that were good questions, the questions of people who understood what they were looking at and were working out how to use it. Hador's documentation arrived by secure transfer at 9:15. Marcus was delivered, subdued and pale, by a man she didn't know at 10:30. He sat down across from Waris and he answered questions for the rest of the morning, and the answers were complete and detailed, and Lydia, sitting across the table, recognized the sound of a man who had been carrying something for 7 years and had finally understood that the only way out from under it was to put it down. By noon, Waris had enough to open formal proceedings against 11 individuals whose names appeared in the ledger in connection to transfers and accounts that had no legitimate explanation. 4 of those names were not from organized crime. One of them held an office. Lydia was done at 12:40. She walked out of the building into midday light she could not see but could feel on her face, the specific warmth of late morning sun in a city that had been washed clean by a night of heavy rain. The air was cold and clear, and the city smelled like itself, like always, like the particular combination of things that New York smelled like and no other place did. Cashin was there. She heard his car on the curb, heard him get out when he heard her footsteps on the building's steps. She walked toward his sound and stopped when she was close. "How did it go?" he said. "It went," she said. A pause. "Is it done?" he said. She thought about that. Done was a complicated word. The proceedings that had started this morning would take months, possibly years, to fully resolve. The names on Waris's list would hire attorneys and generate counter-narratives and move through the legal system with the slow, grinding friction of significant power trying to protect itself. Marcus would spend his days in a relocation program somewhere that wasn't New York, answering questions at scheduled intervals, and that would be his life now. The Romano organization would contract and restructure under the pressure of what was coming, and the Moretti organization would do the same, and the city's criminal infrastructure would shift and adapt the way it always did, because it had been doing that longer than anyone in it had been alive. But the specific thing that had started 10 years ago on a night when 2 men came to a house in the outer boroughs and her father put himself between them and his daughter, that was done. The account of that night was in Waris's possession now, documented, attached to names, aimed at the people who had given the order. That was done. "Yes," she said. "It's done." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Hungry?" She almost laughed. After everything, the hotel lobby, and the penthouse, and the machine shop, and the corridor in Sunset Park, and 2 hours of testimony, this was the question. "Yes," she said. "Actually, there's a place," he said. 2 blocks. Nothing interesting. Coffee. And eggs." "That's exactly interesting enough," she said. They walked. He didn't take her arm, and she didn't ask him to, but he matched his pace to hers, and she tracked him by sound and the shape of his movement through space, and the 2 blocks were easy, the way things are easy when you've stopped needing to perform the managing of them. The restaurant was small. She could tell from the acoustics, maybe 10 tables, the close, warm smell of a place that had been cooking the same things in the same kitchen for 20 years. Someone seated them without ceremony. Coffee arrived. She wrapped her hands around the cup and felt the warmth, and let herself be still. "What happens now?" Cassian said. Not to her specifically, to the air between them, which had earned the question. "You rebuild," she said. "Differently. Smaller and differently." She paused. "That's not advice. That's just what's true." "And you," he said. She thought about the studio apartment in Inwood, the cat, whose name she hadn't actually told the Romano soldiers when she'd started to, because the moment had moved before she could finish the sentence. The students who came on Saturdays and sat in her kitchen and learned to listen to music the way she'd learned to listen to everything, as information, as map, as world. "I have a recording session," she said. "Next Thursday. The studio's on 28th. A pause. "I've been working on a new piece for about a year, my own composition." She paused. "It's just music, nothing inside it." A small pause. "I wanted to know if I could do that. Just music." He was quiet. "Can you?" he said. She thought about the 12 etudes, the years of playing them without knowing what she carried, the sound of them in empty practice rooms and on recital stages, and in the particular alive quiet of a concert hall at the moment before the bow meets the string. She thought, her father had built something extraordinary. But he had built it inside something she had loved first and separately, and the love had been real and entirely her own, and it still was. Yes, she said. I think so. The coffee was good. Outside, the city moved the way it always moved, continuously, without pausing for anything that happened inside it, weather or war, or a night that had restructured several lives simultaneously. It just moved. Buses and taxis and feet on pavement, and the distant percussion of a city under permanent construction, always building something, always knocking something else down to make room. She listened to it. She had always listened to it. Lydia, Cassian said. She waited. Thank you, he said, for trusting me. Eventually. She picked up her coffee. My father trusted you first, she said. I just took longer. Outside, the city went on being the city, indifferent and enormous and full of people carrying things they hadn't chosen to carry, moving toward mornings they hadn't planned for, navigating by whatever maps they'd managed to build. She drank her coffee and she listened to it all, every layer of it, the way she always had. Not as compensation for what she couldn't see, but as the world itself, complete and sufficient, hers. The cup was warm in her hands. That was enough. That for now was exactly enough.